Many of us grew up with crayons and markers as our first artistic media. If we were lucky, we moved up the ranks to colored pencils and pastel, and if our teachers and parents were risk takers, maybe we even got our hands on ink. With the world moving on to digital media, what place is there for crayons? What is the role of paint in a Photoshop world? Let's take a look. Greetings, this is Zach, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today we're going to take a look at 5 benefits of traditional media that still hold strong in a world that is shifting, or has shifted, to largely digital art-making platforms. My first thought when this question came up was simply the tactile sensation of working with traditional media. I enjoy working on my drawing tablet, but there is just something physically different about working with a pen on paper. That subtle scritchety scratch of the implement on the paper is just something I cannot get in a digital format. There is a physical quality to paper, a physical quality to the brush or the pen, or the pencil that you hold, that is ubiquitous to traditional media, and is just so hard to replicate in a digital format. There are brushes that I use simply because I like the grip or the handle better than others. When you drag a brush or a pencil across paper or canvas, there's a subtle resistance that helps your brain track how far you have moved the implement, and this sometimes makes it easier to draw or paint for the intended mark size. I am not sure I noticed this until I started working digitally, and my marks were often longer or shorter than I expected. Subconsciously, I was relying on the physical friction between my pencil and paper to tell me how far I had gone. As much as I wonder if working with traditional media is less efficient than working with digital media, I just cannot get over the physicality of it, the reality of working with real physical things. The second reason is quite a bit removed from the physicality of the first, but I think there is something to be said for understanding where we as artists come from. Working with traditional media gives us some measure of empathy for those that came before us. This might be as simple as looking at some ridiculous piece by Escher and really, truly, deeply understanding that the man has no copy-paste and no undo. His pieces are crazy, weird, three-dimensional structures that defy understanding. He had to meticulously plan all of those in a way that I just don't have to. Everyone up until 30 years ago worked in traditional media as we think of it. Now, I throw it out that way specifically because, of course, photography in the late 1800s and the early 1900s rocked the artistic boat quite a bit. And this is how it's always been, I think. But the revolution of computers in the artistic world seems to just be another level of advancement. Working with these age-old materials can give us an understanding of how lucky we are, how fortunate we are to have a world with screens, cameras in every phone, and digital paper that allows us to pull images out of our mind and throw them into the ethereal realm of the internet. I think empathy with our past, with the humans around the campfire that came before us, can be good for the soul in general. Back to a more grounded and physical arena, my third thought about this is that some things just work better in traditional media than they do in the digital realm. Digital drawing does a wonderful job at approximating many things, but there are still loads of people that prefer sketching and planning prior to moving things onto their digital workspace. A sketchbook is a wonderful tool, one that can go almost anywhere with you, one that requires no power, one that doesn't explode or die when splashed or dropped. My iPad is a lovely piece of hardware, but frankly, my sketchbook is by far my preferred lug around with me wherever I go tool for drawing, sketching, and planning. Much to the chagrin of my teachers in high school and college, I often took notes in my sketchbook. I like that freedom, just the empty space. Traditional media is often much simpler to take onto location to work from scenery or nature too. I live in Colorado, and getting out into the mountains and working from nature live while you were standing there is just hard to beat. Could I take a photo and work from that? Yeah, absolutely, and I do. But of course it isn't the same. We see with 2 eyes and pick up depth perception, whereas the camera only sees through a single lens most of the time. Subtleties of the colors, the shade, the wind, the clouds are not captured in the photo. And this is not even mentioning the emotional components and how we feel being on location. I often work from photos I took, but getting out in the wild is a whole nother experience, and one where traditional media really reigns supreme. In addition, I find it quite difficult to get painterly effects in Photoshop and other software. These things that occur by nature in physical paintings are often much more difficult digitally. Which do you tend toward more, digital or traditional art? How often do you engage in the other? Let me know in the comments down below. This next one is something I have seen a lot of other artists mention in one form or another, and that is the benefits of cross-training artistically. It is surprising how much your artwork can benefit from your time spent with another medium. It is so easy to get locked into your routines, to your normal pathways of engaging with your work, and trying something new can just break you out of that mold. You can expand your horizons sometimes by working with a new media or returning to something you haven't touched in a long time. Expanding your horizons can be such a beneficial thing. I suppose the worst case scenario is as simple as you are extra grateful for your chosen media when you return to it if you absolutely hated your time trying watercolor. But another thing is totally possible, that you return to your chosen media and something you learned from your time with that brush influences your art. You find a different way to hold your pen. You try working without layers. You try working from dark to light or vice versa. These are interesting things that happen when you cross-train. Honestly, your expectations can be a little lower when you try something new, and that can free up your brain to experiment and try things that might be far too risky under normal circumstances. Expanding your horizons artistically will often have unforeseen benefits. Alright, my last thought for now on this topic is simply, you might discover a new love. Whatever you work with now, whichever artistic medium you play around with on a weekly basis, was once new to you. It's like trying new food. You just never know when that next bite is going to be something you think about at 2 in the morning, something that you start craving, but you never would have if you hadn't taken that risk and engaged in it. I love working with watercolor. Always have as long as I can remember. But when I found waterproof ink and I could layer the two on top of each other, I felt like I hit a gold mine. What an awesome thing. I could work really loosely with watercolor and then shore up the edges and details later on with ink. And then I could even go back with the watercolor afterwards and it wouldn't blur the pen lines. It felt revolutionary and exciting. I felt like a little kid. Recently, I discovered gouache paint. Well, recently for me being about 2 years ago, but it again had that same revolutionary response for me. The ability to work white paint back on top of dark areas was just amazing, and it felt so much more forgiving than watercolor paint. If you try these old traditional media, you just never know if you'll run into something that has to be a part of your life going forward. You just never know what's going to stick and what you might fall in love with. If they aren't already a part of your artistic routine, I strongly recommend giving traditional media a chance. Don't worry about the cost either. Yes, I know traditional media can often be very pricey, but you don't have to spend a lot of money on art supplies. You just need a pencil, a ballpoint pen, a $2 set of watercolors. There are some special things that only come from working traditionally. And even if your entire workflow is digital, I urge you, give tradition a chance. Have a good one, y'all. See you soon.